Hello lovelies, welcome back again. So on today's tutorial, I'll be showing you how to make this beautiful dress you're seeing on your screen. I think I'm just going to call it an underbust design gathered dress. I'll show you how to cut and sew it all together. So please do well to watch this video to the end. Like, share and subscribe to my channel while I get started. Now I'm going to begin with drafting out the pattern for this. From the top of my pattern paper, I'll come down by 0.5 inches, and that is going to serve as my shoulder line and also as the starting line. Now from that 0.5 inches, I'm going to take the rest of my measurements. I'll start with my bust point line, which is 10.5 inches. That's my shoulder to bust point, and I'm just going to roll a straight line across. The next line is my shoulder to my under bust, which is 14 inches. I'll roll a straight line, and then next is my shoulder to my waistline, which is 18 inches, and then I'm going to add 1 inch for sewing allowance. Now from the top there, which is the starting line, I'm going to go in by my shoulder to shoulder measurement divided by 2, that is 7.5 inches, and I'm going to come down and mark 8 inches, which is my chest line, and I get that by dividing my bust circumference by 6 and I add 1.5 inches. That is how I calculate my chest line. So I'm going to draw a straight line across there just that way. Now I'm trying to label it here, but I'm sorry it wasn't very clear. I didn't know at this point. So on the waistline, I'm going to go in by my bust span measurement divided by 2, which is 4 inches. I'm going to mark 4 inches on my waistline, on my under bust line, and on my bust point line. Now coming back to the waistline, I'm going to go out from that 4 inches I marked by half an inch, and I'm going to connect this upwards to meet my bust point line. So I'm just trying to draw out my darts, just a basic dart in this case. And after doing that, I went on to just bolden the line so that they can be more visible. So from the top, I have my starting line, which is also the shoulder line. I have my chest line, bust point, under bust, waistline, and a little bit of allowance. Now coming back to the shoulder line, I'll come down by 1 inch, and I'll be using a neck width of 3 inches. Now I'll connect that neck width to the 1 inch below the shoulder line so that I can have my shoulder slope. Now I'll measure from the shoulder slope to the chest line, which is my armhole line, and then I'm going to mark the midpoint of that line, and I'll go in on that midpoint by 0.5 inches. And on my chest line, I'll mark my bust circumference measurement divided by 4. I'll connect for my bust circumference to the 0.5 inches on the midpoint of the armhole line and then to the shoulder slope so that I can have my armhole curve. The next thing to do is to take my body circumference measurement. On the chest line and on the bust point line, I'm going to take my bust circumference measurement divided by 4, and I'll add 2 inches of allowance to it. Moving on to my waistline, I'll mark my waist circumference divided by 4. I'll replace that intake of 1 inch and I'll add 2 extra inches for allowance. And I'm going to use my curve ruler to just connect the points this way. Now I'll go on to take my side dart. So on the bust point line, I'll come down by 1.5 inches and I'll connect that to my bust span measurement where all the darts are meeting. So I got the figure for my side dart by subtracting my shoulder to waist in front minus my shoulder to waist behind. So that's what gives me 1.5 inches. Moving on to draw out my neckline, still on my bust point line, I'll go up by 1 inch and I'll connect that 1 inch upwards to meet the neck width of 3 inches I have on the shoulder line. And I'll just use a straight ruler to draw it this way like a V. So in total, I have a neck depth of 9.5 inches. Next, I'm going to make a curve from the neck depth round the under bust and back to the chest line. So I'm going to place my curve ruler this way. As you can see, I have the curve just sitting on the under bust line where I have the darts passing through. And after drawing the first curve, I'm going to turn my curve ruler around and I'll make sure that the curve ends on the chest line exactly where I have my bust circumference measurement marked. So I am not including any allowance to this curve. Now I'm done with that, I'll go ahead and cut it out, but I forgot I had not closed the side dart, and if I don't do that, it's going to affect the curve by the time I am sewing. So I'm going to just pick from the bust point line where I have the side dart and I'll place it over the 1.5 inches I came down by. And after doing this, you can see that the line is no longer even, the curve I made there. So I'll use my ruler to just replace the shortage I have and also replace the shortage on the side if you have any, and I'll proceed to cut everything all out. I'll cut out the sides, the armhole, and the neck depth. Now, after doing that, I'm also going to cut through the underbust, the curve that I made that is passing through the underbust. I'll cut that out because this top front is going to have 2 separate pieces. Now, let's just call this piece the top piece and the other piece the band piece. Now, for this top part, I'll go ahead and close the dart. I'll pick one of the dart lines, cross it over the other, and use a pin to just hold it in place. Next is to slash some lines on this top part. You can use a ruler to draw out some lines before slashing, but I'm just going to do it randomly. I'll just cut through from the underbust upwards, and I'll place a fresh paper under it so that I can spread it. And I'm going to spread all the slash lines, making sure I have at least 1 inch of allowance. Well, it depends on how full you want the gathers under the bust to be. So I'm just going to spread it with at least 1 inch of allowance between each spread, and I'll go ahead and cut it following the shape of the main paper on top. After doing that, these are the pieces I have for the top front. This is the fabric I'll be using for this project. This is lace fabric. I have lining to match, and I also have a zipper. I'm not sure what kind of lace this is, but it is really flowy. I'm going to place my fabric on a fold, and on the folded edge I will come in by 1.5 inches, which is going to serve as my zipper allowance. Now I want to first of all draft and cut out the back pieces before I cut out the front. So from the top of the fabric I came down by 0.5 inches. Next I came down by my chest line of 8 inches, followed by the bust point line of 10.5 inches, and next is my waistline, which is 16.5 inches. Now my shoulder to waist in front is 18 inches, while my shoulder to waist at my back is 16.5 inches, and I'll add 1 inch of allowance to the lower part. Moving back to the top where I have my starting line, I'm going to mark my shoulder to shoulder measurements divided by 2. I'll mark it on the starting line there and also on the chest line, and I'll connect the 2 points with a straight line. Now take note that all these measurements are starting from the zipper allowance line and not from the folded edge of this fabric. Now I'll go on to draw out my shoulder slope by coming down from the shoulder line by 1 inch and connecting it to the neck width of 3 inches. So I'm using the same neck width I used for the front for this back piece as well. The next thing is to draw out my armhole curve. So exactly what I did for the front pattern is what I'm doing here for the back. After that, I'll move on to my neck depth. I'm going to be using only 1.5 inches for the neck depth at the back, and I'll connect it to the 3 inches neck width at the shoulder line. Now going on to take my body circumference measurement. On the chest line I marked my bust circumference divided by 4 and I added 2 inches of allowance, and on the waistline I marked my waist circumference divided by 4 and I added 3 inches of allowance. 1 inch is for the dart intake and the other 2 inches is for sewing allowance. After that, I'll cut it out from the lower part to the sides, the neckline, the shoulder line and the armhole. Please do well to add your allowance where necessary. And I'll proceed to slash the midpoint of this back piece where I have the zipper allowance so that I can have 2 separate pieces for the back. Next is to get rid of zip bulge. So I would go in by 0.5 inches and go up by 0.5 inches on the waistline, and I'm just going to cut it inwards and upwards toward the neckline and toward the dart on the lower part. I hope you understand what I am saying. Now these are the pieces for my back. I'm going to bring in the front pieces so that I can cut it out. So placing my fabric on a fold again, I'm going to place the top piece of this front and the band piece as well. I'll make sure that I place the band piece very close to the folded edge of the fabric because I'm going to cut it out as one piece, while for the top pieces is going to be 2 separate pieces. So I'm cutting out the top piece, adding allowance to the lower parts, that's where I have the underbust, and to the neckline, the shoulder and the armhole, basically everywhere. For the band piece, I'm going to add allowance only to the underbust curve area there. I'm not adding any allowance to the lower part or to the side because I already added that on paper. Now I'm done with that, I'm going to take off the pins and open it up so that we can see what we have cut out. So placing it this way, I'm going to make some mini pleats around this underbust area on the top piece here. So when I do that, it's going to drag the armhole to match with the armhole of the band area. I hope you understand what I mean. And I'll go ahead and cut out lining pieces for all the front and back pieces I have cut out together with the exact same measurement. Now I'm done cutting out the lining, I would separate the pieces this way. Starting with the back pieces, I'll place the lace on the lining right sides together. I would sew around the neckline, the zipper allowance area and the sides, then I turn it over to the right side. And for the front pieces, I'll also place the lace on the lining right sides together. I would sew the neckline first, turn it over to the right side before I sew around the underbust. For the band piece, I'm also going to do the same thing, place the lace on the lining right sides together. I'll sew the sides first, turn it over to the right side before I sew around the underbust. So this is it after sewing it. These are the front pieces and here are the back pieces. The next thing is to sew my dart. Now I'm going to sew the dart of the lining and the main fabric together. Also for this underbust part, that's this band, I'm going to also sew the dart here. I didn't close it on paper like I did for the top front. Now this is it after sewing the dart, the lining and the fabric together. I wanted to make sure they are placed together because this lace has really wide spaces and I want the lining to sort of close or cover the seam of the dart. Now bringing the top pieces to attach to the band, I'll be sewing them together around the underbust. So I'll first of all make sure that I have the armhole part of the top with the armhole part of the band aligned together. I'll sew from the armhole there all the way to the underbust, make some mini pleats there and then to the center. So of course I'm going to place them right sides together. I'll take it to my machine and I'll make a straight stitch from that armhole all the way till I get to where I have my dart on the band. That's from the underbust downwards, and then from there I'm going to make some mini pleats. Now instead of pleating it this way while sewing, you can just go ahead and run a gather stitch. Just run a straight stitch there and make some gathers before attaching it to the band. I think it's going to be easier that way so that you know the exact measurement you need before sewing. So you just have to make straight stitches on your machine. So I just decided to pleat it while I was sewing. After attaching one side, I'll go ahead and attach the other side. So bringing in the second piece of the top, I'll place it this way and I'll sew from the midpoint this time. And when I get to somewhere close to where I have the dart, I'll make some mini pleats around that area and I'll sew a straight stitch all the way to the armhole. Now I'm done attaching the top front pieces together. This is what it looks like. You can see the mini pleats around the underbust area there. Now it's time to attach the back pieces to the front. So bringing in the back pieces, I'll place them right sides together with the front, and I'll first of all join the shoulders before I go on to join the sides. So I'm going to use my body circumference measurement to just join the sides together, and this is what I have. Now I'll proceed to cut out the gathers for the skirt part. So bringing back my lace fabric, I'm going to be using a length of 24 inches. I eventually made it shorter than this, but for now, while I was cutting it out, I made use of 24 inches in length, and in width I had 32 inches multiplied by 3. So 32 inches in 3 places was what I used for the width of the gathers to actually gather it round my waist. So I used my waist circumference measurement times 3. Now I'm just going to open up the top this way, and I'll bring in the skirt piece I cut out so that I can make some gathers around the waist. And as you can see, this is what I have after I was done. I just made some pleats while I was sewing from one zipper allowance to the other zipper allowance on the waistline. Now the next thing to do is to bring in the lining for the skirt. I'm going to attach it by placing the right side of the lining on the wrong side of the dress. So I made sure that the top and the skirt part are right sides facing each other first, and then I brought in the lining and I'm going to sew it on the joining of the top with the skirt. And now when I get to the end, that's where I have the zipper allowance, I'm going to sew the lining with the main fabric with the skirt just at the zipper allowance area there. I really hope you understand. I'm just trying to see how I can achieve a sort of neat finish around the seams on the waistline and on the center back of the skirt. So that's why I'm trying to make the lining to enclose the seams that I have made. And as you can see inside, there are no rough edges except around the underbust, which I'm eventually going to weave. Now it is time to attach my zipper. So I'm using a black zip to match. So from the top of the center back, I'll just sew it all the way to about 5 or 6 inches below the waistline. And here it is after attaching the zipper here. I also went ahead to close from where the zip stops all the way to the end. And as you can see, the dress looks shorter because I've cut it out to my desired length. The next thing to do is to attach my sleeve. And to do that, I'm going to place another piece of fabric on a fold so that I can cut out the sleeve. So from the top of the fabric, I'll come down by the length I need the sleeve to be, which is 7 inches. And still from the top of the fabric, I'll come down by 4 inches. Now 4 inches is my shoulder to where my bicep starts from. That is my cap's height. So I'll come down by 4 inches, and from that 4 inches I'll make a curve upwards to meet the shoulder point where I have the folded edge. I'm really sorry this sleeve cutting tutorial is not very detailed. I'll try to make a more detailed sleeve tutorial next time. Now I'm just going to rule a straight line inwards. I'm supposed to take my bicep circumference measurement, but I don't think I showed that on here. I'll go ahead and just cut out the top following the curve, and I'll also cut out the lower part. So the top curve there is supposed to take your round armhole measurement. So please take note. Now I've cut out one sleeve, I'm just going to put my fabric on a fold again and place the sleeve I cut out on the other one to just trace out the exact same thing. Now it's time to attach it to the dress. So I'll place the sleeve right sides together first, and I will sew it straight down from the armhole, and then I'll go on to attach it to the dress. And the dress is almost ready. I decided to just use this rope like I saw from the inspiration. I just cut out a little piece of fabric and I sewed it inwards just to make a small rope. I'm going to just use my hand needle to tack it to the midpoint of the dress. And we've come to the end of this tutorial. This is all for this dress. Very simple and easy. I hope you get to try it out. Now for the full length of this dress, from the shoulder to the end, you know I said I was going to make it shorter. Everything came out as 38 inches in length. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please do well to give it a thumbs up, share and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye.